All right. Can you remove all the note takers? Hello, hello. My friend Karan, can you just get rid of those note takers? Hi, everybody. How we doing?
Hi, Mark.
Hey, Peter. Hi, Chris. Kelvin. Kelvin, are you in Singapore or Hong Kong?
I am in Hong Kong. Wow, you're looking very smart today.
I am. Feeling very
Awesome.
smart.
I'm in Hong Kong, yeah.
Bender, I'm on the rebound.
Good, good, good. I
That
agree.
would've been fun.
I agree with Chris. You're looking very sharp. What? Where's the date afterwards?
Exactly. I don't need a date.
Come on, we all need a date.
Oh, yes, that's true.
So is your theme song for the day Smart Dressed Man?
Right. Though the funny thing is, Depender, you just showed up at my neighborhood establishment, right? You just showed up, Depender, and he thought he'd see me. But usually I play soccer on Sundays, and we are loyal post game. This is being recorded, it's fine. But post game drinks at the St. James Gate in Maplewood, New Jersey. But I had type A flu, so I'm on the rebound. Pender sends me a picture from the bar. Did your team win?
No, unfortunately, they lost.
Fair enough. So lots to cover. Let's see if I can share my screen here. All right. And we need to talk about Mumbai. I know you want us to go to Delhi, Pender. And we're being pushed to go to Australia. So you all received this digest, so all the videos are here. And I wanted to actually, that's an interesting one. Have you all been to the Explorers Club in New York City? This is what it looks like.
Yes.
That was my first time. If you hadn't been, it really is. They have these all over the country, and this was the first. And thanks to ProChain. Let's see other videos from last week. We were in Austin.
Yeah, first I'm sorry that you.
This is a better one, I think. Sorry, I'm not as teed up. Well, this is where we will be on April 2nd. This is our host, Margaret.
I'm Margaret Butler, and I'm originally from New Jersey. Now I live in New York City, and I am the co-head of the financial services industry team here at Baker Hostetler. The content.
And that's where we'll be. Videos are there. Here comes Stephen. Next week will be the 5th anniversary of our briefings. 5 years. It started during COVID, of course. Stephen, I don't know if you heard that.
I did not. I just joined.
Next week will be the 5th anniversary of the briefings.
Wow, seems like just yesterday.
Yeah, isn't it? So I remember, does everybody remember the first time that they said, nah, maybe I'll stay at home. I won't meet. It was March, well, we were doing Texas and Ohio with Stephen, and I came back and I did a Zoom, and suddenly 35 people showed up, more people than in the meeting. I was like, this could be efficient. And the next Tuesday, Stephen Berg, I'll have to find that video. I don't know if we were recording it then.
I hope not.
So 5 years. I'm hoping you'll let us come back to not your offices next week, possibly. It feels like we should. Um, if you'll be there at that time. And so we'll talk about, I thought the data points you're going to talk about today I don't even want to steal your thunder. It's amazingly bearish data points that you're going to hear about.
And yet I'm not.
Well, that's what makes a horse race. Maybe in Michigan, they got it wrong. I wanted to talk about uh, Riyadh a bit, and it's so good. But this is the interesting thing. I can't even tell you who's coming. I'm not allowed. Um, it's discretion is everything. People are bringing, I've got a big LP. He's the head of this and that, but he doesn't want to be named. And I have the princess this. Now, some are coming and they're going to be espousing it and taking over roundtables, but others, and it's happening very rapidly. So there's a steering committee meeting on Thursdays, those who want to contribute to that. And you know how there's no drinking in Riyadh, Depender?
Yes, I do, unfortunately.
Guess what I have? There's a certain embassy that's going to welcome us.
Oh, great.
So
It's not the Indian embassy, is it?
no, it is not. So um, be ready for that. Just to let everybody know, I got a flight to Riyadh round trip for 980 on a Sky team. Hotel, um, mid high 200s, 3 nights. Um, so getting there is pretty, you have to fly through London, Germany, or Paris, typically, unless you want to go direct to Dubai and hop over. But it's pretty reasonable to get over there. So, um, I'm sorry, I'm showing the credit instead of Riyadh. So, yeah, great set of speakers. Some of the Saudi families we can mention, some of the speakers. But this has been a year and a half in the making, and really it's hats off to Roberta Calarese. Roberta, you can see here. She's been 20 plus years in country. Whoops. And married to an Emirati. She helped change the constitution of the UAE to allow for companies to register and contracts to be governed by UK law. I don't know if Riyadh will go or Saudi will go that direction, but she's been building and coaching, advising families to be more purposeful and thus the world with purpose, the event. Just, getting better and better every single day. I can't even keep up with it. So just any questions on Riyadh? I mean, actually, the one thing I would say, if you want to come, step one, as you see here when you on the page, is to indicate your interest in this form. And it's basically just let us know, what you're interested in, how you want to participate, these basics. Even if you're an allocator. Again, you can skip it if you've done it already. And then if you're an allocator, just update your diagnostic if you haven't done it in 6 months. And then otherwise, you can register. And I can, if you haven't done an event and you, with 361, I can get you some discount, but I'm the sort of the co-chef, probably the sous chef on this one, so I can't do a whole lot, but and everything's super expensive. But hotels, at least to put on an event, hotels are not that bad. Where we're having it is 6 to 900. These are more like the 2 to 500 range. So let me pause on that one. Duraya is like northwest, not too far from central Riyadh, but that's where it's located. Any questions on? I mean, Kelvin, you're looking to come? Is that a nod of the head? Thumbs up.
Yes, I'm looking to come. Yes.
Beautiful. I know Carl Pro talked about it. Any uh, Vanessa Grillet. I am here to Constantine. Are you joining us or Shujat? I hope all
Hi.
you joining.
Yeah,
You have a question?
I do have a question. Can you talk a little bit about sort of like the stages of funds or like sectors of interest that
Sure.
yeah, do well at these
So,
events?
so I would say, see if I can. Uh, it's not going to be perfect, but I will try to blow this up for you. As far as stages of funds, um, it's probably for well, two things. One is what the Saudis want, and I think the region overall is don't just come with your hand out looking for money.
Mm.
Is to come and be engaged and be additive. Even if you're like one of our clients has a venture fund and they're looking to set up a once or twice a year workshop in country. Uh, Others are just trying to find ways that they could be additive. Carl does anyway. There are everybody is a little coming from a different place. So if you're a fund, you should look at this as not where you're going to go and grab, LP capital on one go, is you're going to develop relationships. What I can tell you is, I mean, you can go to lots of other events. This will be one of the most interactive events you will have in a 361 and Roberta's style of having roundtables to form those relationships. So I don't think it matters if you're a first time fund or what stage fund. Somehow I muted myself. I don't know. But maybe a more specific question, Opal?
Um,
But
yeah,
the
so
themes, sorry, I didn't answer. So the themes will be as follows. You know, leadership, AI, big thing on women. There's women for purpose on day two and impact. And these will be some of I'd say industrial tech is another one being added, but health, energy, fintech, AI, agri, desert tech, prop tech, will be the roundtables I'll be hosting. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I think that was really it. Like if we're I represent a group that does a lot of work in sort of like neurotech and frontier health technologies,
Oh,
and
yes.
finding ways to connect with folks who have that same sort of affinity, like that would be really helpful. Is there a way to express on your profile or like find other folks who are going to be at the conference ahead of time that are going to be interested in those things? What's the best way to
So,
connect with that?
so express it on that form that when you onboard of what your interests are, and between me and Roberta and the others and the steering committee, we'll try to make those connections. Another thing we're doing is we're not running off immediately to Abu Dhabi. We're going to stick around that third day and have breakfast roundtables so that you've met a ton of people, just to have an extra bite of the apple. Um, So we try to have, and you'll see everybody that's interested in health will be at the health tech roundtable. You'll see, so that'll sort of be a natural gathering of your interest there. Any other questions on Riyadh? Bless you, Peter. Peter, you've done a lot in the region, right?
Absolutely. In fact, yeah, I would love to be invited as a speaker there. I'm not gonna necessarily come unless I can contribute to a panel or such, but I've had a lot of experience specifically in offering help with establishing the rights and regulations for IP over there, which really doesn't exist. There's one organization in Abu Dhabi that kind of trickles over, but it's been discouraging to a lot of US stakeholders to engage over there based on zero accountability and reporting for IP transaction and usage. And it's something I'm very eager to help work with, whether it's, the royal family or some of the funds over there, but in establishing that and an entire industry that's worth trillions of pound dollars over
Okay.
there.
Well, I make a note to connect you with a few people, including Roberta. We can see if we can how that can fit into the agenda.
Be huge. And regardless of if I make it, I still would love to connect. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I was just there 3 weeks ago, Mark,
Yep.
in Abu Dhabi and in Riyadh and Jeddah. And I mean, for anybody who has never been to that region or especially Saudi Arabia, it's an eye opener. I hadn't been in probably a decade. And the change and I think perception versus reality, and also just the investment and technological innovation happening and the willingness to listen and drive that investment. And to your point, like just going there to raise money is not probably the right approach, but more what can you bring to the region and then also then take it to elsewhere. I think is the approach that most of the groups there appreciate.
What was the most surprising thing for you?
I think the ambition is very real. It's not just in like all talk and no action. There's a lot of stuff happening there.
Yep.
So I think that's in the past, like I grew up in Dubai, so I know that UAE very well. But there's always like a lot of meetings and then nothing really happens. So it's just changed considerably. The pace of decision making has changed considerably. But you have to invest the effort and also do something for the region.
Right. So I have so many anecdotes to back that up. And yet and very curious. Yeah, they're not on air. They're trying to learn. Pierce Cumberledge teaches he actually with PIF. He's been doing executive education program PIF for a long time. He also teaches HEC, and then for people from the region, and he's found that the Saudis are just come to work, come to learn, and yeah, and it's amazing whether if you're a 10-year-old Saudi girl, how you think the world is open with possibility. It's it's an amazing outlook, and they got the money to back it up now, or they've always had it, but now they've aligned the stars. So it's a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so that's Riyadh. Hopefully you all can decide to come, and if you do, call me. We'll try to be helpful. to your earlier question, Opal, and others. Sooner, right around the corner, is um, our this is our agenda for we're going to talk about private credit and private equity. So we've been doing a lot in venture, but this is frankly this is where we raise most of our money, and there are different strategies for corporate credits, real estate credit, financing, public fixed income, structured credit, including the CLO, CSO market, and then we'll talk about the private equity dynamics and then different niches. And we'll have actually, we almost have it ready, but we'll have we have usually the initial panels we'll announce probably tomorrow or the next day. And that's at Baker Hostetler again, really like their offices. Overlooks the skating rink, as we saw. And that one it will be the focus of the next Tuesday call, and I think we'll have another separate call just to finish out the panels. If anybody's got any questions there, it'll start off with our allocator session, and then at 1 o'clock, everything starts. Hope to have a high profile keynote to announce here soon. But that's sort of bread and butter for us here at 361 these days. Any questions on that one? If not, then okay, this we're going to talk about in 10 minutes. I thought you did a great job. I'm not quite sure what the title was on that one, Stephen, but I thought the content was good.
It's the action of the Trump and the reaction of the rest of the world.
Okay. Yeah. This was the Explorers Club I already mentioned earlier. Really enjoyed that experience. Austin was interesting. This was the end of the night. We had a really big group. There's Joe Milan with the beard. You guys haven't seen him lately. We had a really good round table there, and this was sort of one of their installation of the domes. Yeah, I think that's it, except for planning for the West Coast. We'll be doing the San Francisco, Berkeley, Stanford, except now we'll go up to Seattle on the late in the 17th for the 18th. So, well, that'll be you'll be hearing it from us over the next couple weeks on that one. And then Newport, and then the fall, London and Mumbai will be our first official event in Mumbai in October. Next
Mark,
week
when was the West 16th through the 19th for the West Coast?
through 18th.
Okay,
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
now I can. Yep.
So yeah, it'll be like last time, except we'll jump up to Seattle, and since we're there, and there's a lot of we're not doing Bainbridge, it's pretty much just going to go straight into and it's being there's a Verizon has a hub up there, and Boeing has a research lab there, so it'll be an interesting. It won't be Berkeley or Stanford, but it'll be still interesting. Next week, we're going to focus on health tech and something called tech bio at the end of the, what's the subject? You already have a subject, Stephen, right?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Well, I'm 100% sure what our deep dive will be on tech bio. It's basically AI meets biotech. And some of you saw Sahir Ali from Modi Ventures speak. So that will be that focus. We will play ping pong before the second for those who are signed up. Again, back at Spin Flatiron. Eddie Bonaparte and I still have not lost a match as double partners. But is anybody good at ping pong here?
Not.
I knew I knew Kelvin was a closet, and not maybe not even closet, but if you can make it, I don't think I'm gonna get Eddie to be in Riyadh, but maybe I'll have to find a place in Riyadh to play ping pong. Keep the
Let me
tradition.
ask my friends. I'll see if I can find a place for you.
That would be great. That and or pickleball. So I'm trying to the pickleball US Open is taking place at the same time. Otherwise, the head of the National Pickleball Center would have been in Riyadh. So we're trying to bring pickleball to Saudi, doing our everything we can. I think I've hit the basics, yeah. I'll pull it back up. I made you dizzy. And if anybody wants to get involved in any of these events, let us know. Takes a village. We're sort of already putting this San Francisco, Seattle one together, but we'll have a mobilization call. Newport's pretty easy. London and Singapore, Mumbai, we could use some help. Takes a village. Bill Deichler,
I am here.
I'm interested to see how our community views, depending on the timing, dovetail with what Stephen's going to talk about, post-Trump opinions.
Yes, we had pre-Trump opinions, and well, he's not gone, as Monty Python says.
Pre-inauguration opinions.
Right, not dead yet. So, but yeah.
So I was thinking of you as I was looking at some of the slides we're about to see.
Right.
Mark, I would wait till after April 2nd before I thought about that issue.
I keep hearing April 2nd. You know what's April 2nd?
Somebody's birthday, maybe.
Mark's birthday.
Yep,
How did you know that, Depender?
I got it in my calendar.
My daughter's birthday is the same day.
It was so funny hearing Trump talk about when he was going to implement certain things. He didn't want to do it on April 1st. Thank
Right.
God it was not an April 1st, baby. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I remember my best April Fool's joke was waking up reading the Moscow Times, because I lived in Moscow for 8 years, and when Russia sells Far East to China, and it was a serious article, made a serious argument, and I think it was during Yeltsin era. But does anybody know what Putin and Trump discussed this morning? I haven't looked. Okay. Any other questions before we move into briefing land? Or anything you think we should be focused on or know about? Hi, Sarah. It's good to see you last week. Sarah, Nicholas, Andrew. Let some people in and turn it over to you, Stephen.
We're good, Mark.
We are good. We are ready for you. Number 258. Next week, everyone, will be our 5th anniversary of doing these briefings, which started at least regularly during COVID, as COVID hit. And here we are. They keep getting better and better, Stephen. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, so a key element of the Trump administration's plan was to overwhelm the opposition, both domestic and global, to fast track one of the most aggressive policy agendas in decades. And there were 5 areas of focus: securing the border, deregulation, and lowering energy costs, which have been well received; public sector reform, which had received mixed reviews; and the unclear tariff policy, which has been really one of the big causes of the global uncertainty that we're dealing with. And this heightened uncertainty has really shifted the market narrative, as it's considered having a considerable impact on the changes relating to geopolitics and also capital flows. As Mark mentioned, President Trump and President Putin were meeting this morning to just have some discussions about the conflict in Ukraine. So there's a lot going on, and the uncertainty has led to people pulling in their expectations for growth, and we've seen, and raising their expectations for a recession. So in the last couple of days, you've seen JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Ed Yardeni have all increased their odds of recession risk. Ed Yardeni took his from 20 to 35%. I think JP Morgan went from 17 to 31, and Goldman somewhere around the same level. Although they've raised the odds, but they really don't see a recession coming right now. But you've also seen downgrades of the growth expectations as well. So there's a lot of puts and takes going on right now. I want to focus primarily on the shorter term impact, but I don't want to lose sight of the longer term one, so we'll come back to that in a minute. But last week we discussed the focus on the 3 big shifts, and it was really the actions of the Trump administration led to the reactions of the rest of the world, particularly what Germany is voting on today for their whatever it takes moment to really increase their defense spending and release the debt brake that they were dealing with. At the same time, China, the world's been waiting for China to react to the tariffs, and they're starting to react now with a focus on boosting consumption to offset the decline in exports, as well as the deflationary pressures that they're dealing with. So these are 3 big changes where it was coming into the year, and really from the Trump election in November to the beginning of the year, it was no alternative to the US. Now you've seen Germany step up, Europe stepping up to give reason to invest there, and then China doing a lot to balance off the effects of their economic challenges. The question is it going to be enough to really shift capital on a more permanent basis? And I would say that the jury's still out on both, whether Germany and Europe is going to do enough, and whether the China efforts to boost consumption do more than just stabilize the Chinese economy and keep their growth rate where they are, but do they really spur the growth needs that are coming? I'm suspicious of both, but I think in the near term, the markets are taking the advantage of the opportunity. Whether it's sustainable or not is another issue. But I want to talk about the uncertainty and what it's doing and what the impact is in the near term right now. And this is a chart I introduced about a month or 2 ago. And what this index does is it takes news sentiment, takes the actual policies of governments, and then it takes the market sentiment and puts it into an index. And you can see the impact of what's going on today is at a higher level of economic uncertainty than we saw with the pandemic, which was a once in 100-year event. So you can get a sense of how distorted things are in the near term. I would also say, Mark, as I'm going to show these slides, the reaction is going to be how negative things are. And I would say, don't get caught up in that, acknowledge it, but don't take that as where the world's going, because I think this is a normal part of the cycle that we should be in for the shifts that are going on today. In the US, we're seeing, because of this uncertainty, you're starting to get concerns about the paradox of thrift, which is when times get uncertain, people pull in their spending and it creates higher saving rates, less consumption, and that perpetuates the down cycle. So with the expectations for personal finance coming in so much in the University of Michigan reading, that is pause for concern near term. You're seeing that sentiment is way down from the University of Michigan survey, and inflation expectations are way up. And the reason I'm less concerned about this than I think the market expectations are, is I think if you go back to October and November, you saw a much different view of expectations and a much different view of consumer sentiment. And now you're starting to see a shift. I think these swings are too short-term oriented and reflection of very near-term expectations and emotions and not the longer-term economic realities. I think one area of concern is you are seeing a sentiment declining for all earners, including the ones earning over 100,000. They are the drivers for 50% of the consumption. So you have to be mindful of what's going on here. But I also think this is a short-term reaction, not necessarily what's going on for the longer term. Part of the reason consumers are pulling in is they're increasingly worried about their jobs. You can see the expectations for more employment. This is going the wrong way, so more unemployment. So this is a concern because of DOGE, because of corporate retrenching, because of AI. People are a little unsettled right now, but I think this is a little bit of an overreaction that's going on. However, businesses are reacting to the uncertainty as well. Small businesses are rethinking their expansion plans. Larger corporations are looking at their spends and their payrolls and looking for where they can pull in costs because they are dealing with higher pricing, and do they pass on higher input costs from the tariffs, and they're worried about, can they pass that all on right now? I think the surveys from last week said companies are eating a lot of the price increases in the near term, but that is unsustainable for the long term. So we're really dependent on what happens on April 2nd and how far does the Trump administration go? How do our allies and adversaries work to counter the plans? Do they take an approach like Mexico, where they're being more conciliatory and more partnering, or they take the approach like Canada, which is more aggressively negative? I think that you'll see a balance that's coming, but these are some of the shorter term issues that are on the table. Because of this, it's complicating decisions for central banks because, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the risks to inflation have become decidedly more two-sided. So you're seeing who's going, the Fed, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan are all due to come out this week. You also have other central banks looking to decide what they're going to do. I think the Fed right now is in a wait and see mode. I think they'll be on hold for a bit of time. I still think the market expectations for 3 rate cuts is a little too aggressive. I think maybe 1 to 2 is more likely for this year, but a lot depends on what the outcome is of what happens with tariffs on April 2nd. So what all this means for investors. So short-term inflation expectations are up. Consumer spending is probably going to be slowed down. CapEx will slow down, and other countries will be increasing tariffs on the US in the near term. I think that's a reality that we're going to be facing. However, in the medium term, not the long term, but in the medium term, we are going to see a reversal of onshoring and reshoring in big numbers. For the last 2 years, we've seen a slowdown in onshoring and reshoring. I expect you'll see that pick up again as a result of the administration's policies. I think deregulation is real, and it is lowering costs for businesses and opening up the door, particularly for mid-sized businesses, to do better. But we are going through a transition from government to private sector spending. There is a gap that goes on between that transition, but I expect that private sector will, once they have greater clarity after we get through the recip tariff discussion on how they're going to spend and where they're going to spend. I think you can't discount the lower taxes or lower energy costs that are real, that are playing through the system right now. I also think that you will see other nations lower tariffs as that will play out as well. So I think you're seeing a lot of near-term concerns, and that is playing out in the AAII Bear Bullish Survey. As you can see, bearish sentiment is near record levels. The highest was back on February 26th of this year at 60%, and now we're at 59%. The bullish at a historically low level, and these, for a contrarian, are good signs for the market. So I think this is something to keep in mind. Remember, we came into the year with what everyone perceived as an overvalued market because we had two very strong moves the last 2 years. So where are people right now? A lot of people view the sentiment being just about right. Some people think we're starting to get too bearish. Others are too bullish and others are not sure. I think we're in a mode right now where you will be in a level of heightened uncertainty through probably mid-April as we get through the recip tariffs and then the reaction to the recip tariffs. And that'll allow things to get back on a better track. So this is a time for, in the public markets, I think you're looking to upgrade the quality and focus on the areas where capital is going to flow. I think that will remain the areas of need, whether it's infrastructure spend, whether it's national security, whether it's productivity improvements. Those will be the areas that capital is going to flow to. I also think you have to keep in mind a couple numbers that are worth having in the back of your head. We had in the last 75 years about 30 corrections of 10% to or more. So about every 2 years, we're going to have a correction. We had 2 years of 20% up market returns. 3 out of the last 4 were close to 20% returns. So having a 10% pullback is perfectly normal and healthy for the market. Of those, I believe about 12 of them have turned into full-blown recessions. And I think you had about 27 bear markets. The interesting thing about bear markets since 1929, from 29 to 45, we had a bear market about every 1.5 years. From 45 on to today, we've had one about every 5 years. So bear markets of 20% decline don't happen that often, but they are part of the normal cleansing that we need to go through. I think there are 2 other things that people need to keep in mind. One is fixed income markets are now providing an alternative to equities that they didn't provide the last couple of years, with yields not only in the US, but picking up around the world to levels that give you an alternative to equities. I also think that the changes in Europe and in Asia are giving you opportunities to reallocate some of your money away from the US to those markets. I would just be cautious about going too fast, too far, because I think there are real issues that we have to work through in Europe and to get their money spent that they're talking about spending. One is the vote today in Germany. 2 is that there are other issues that are weighing on Europe getting the money put to work. One is their regulatory and framework is very restrictive, and it will delay how fast the defense spend can get put to work because you have the counter of the ESG initiatives, which are still very large impacts on how money's being put to work. And you saw that with the Danish pension plan yesterday, talking about how they may preclude US investments from having not the same values that the pensions have over there, whether it's relating to ESG or not. So that's going to put some companies in conflict with the policies of the Trump administration, with the policies of European nations. So I think you have to be careful about getting too bullish about the shifts. And because of the rapid move that the European markets and the Chinese markets have already had, I think you have to think some of the easy money has been already made, and you have to be a little bit more cautious about how you're putting money to work there. Similarly, I'd be cautious about how fast you run away from the US market as well. So Mark, I'm going to start there and open it up for discussion.
All right. Thank you. Putting that
I
in
just
context.
add one thing, Mark. With the pullback from expectations on growth and some of the other expectations. I would say from a market perspective, we came into the year with a lot of these strategists looking at, about 7,000 on the S&P. They've since pulled that back down to anywhere from 5,300 from the most negative one I've seen to about 6,500 for the average. And if we got back to 6,500 from these levels, you'd be looking at 1 years of healthy returns for the US, about what the historical average would be from current price levels. So that's the other reason to not get too negative on what's going on, because we've taken a lot of the froth out of the market. So we'll stop there and open it up.
Fair enough. Roger Arjun.
Hey, Stephen, I'll try to save your voice a little bit. But what's the correlation between bear markets and recessions in the data time period you have? Is it 100%?
No, it's less than that. I think it's around 40%.
40% of bears and then have a recession associated with it.
Yeah, I believe that's the number, but don't quote me on it.
Okay, thanks.
Bill Eichler.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, you were guessing at my question with your last comments. Is Ed still at 7,000?
No, he's at
S&P, or did he come
6,400.
in?
6,400. They raised the odds of a recession from 20 to 35%.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Also,
I think the uncertainty is slowing down spending both on the corporate and consumer side. That'll weigh on growth expectations, and that'll hurt earnings, hurt multiples more than earnings. He thinks the earnings are going to be pretty healthy still.
Interesting. Also, I thought your chart on business expectations was really interesting, because if you looked at the bars like at the end of 24, I think that was the enthusiasm about the change in administration, and then all of a sudden with the tough talk on tariffs, et cetera, a rather dramatic change of frame of mind for that one.
Yeah, I think we've seen the same thing though in the markets, Bill, that we started the year very enthusiastic, the post-election period with a lot of enthusiasm, and then you get some of the reality settling in. And the uncertainty that's been created by the administration, which is partly by design, is a question of, do they go too far with that? And also, do they go too far with the recip tariffs, particularly on value-added tax? I think that's really where a lot of the pushback is going to come, because that would be a stretch. And I think what the market's really wrestling with is what is the purpose of the tariffs? And I think the element that's really difficult right now is there's a growing belief that it's designed to offset, it's to raise tax revenue, to offset some of the tax decreases that he wants to do. And I think that's a really tough math. I think we did 97 million in basically tariff revenue last year. To get that to 4.7 trillion would be a stretch.
To say the least.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
Well, I guess, I don't know if I may, Stephen, what do you, I mean, this has essentially been a blitzkrieg in these first, couple of months. And I think clearly the clock is ticking on the midterms. But I don't know, do you have any thoughts about pace? Because it seems like a lot of the major things have been hit. They need to continue at, taking the perspective of Trump and his agenda as far as getting things done. But I don't think the speed with which he's been acting is going to be able to be maintained for a while. I think it's still going to go, but any thoughts on that?
I think the midterms are really fascinating right now, because you have the Democrats fighting with the Democrats right now on how to face off against the administration. So that actually will be a big determining factor on what the opposition is for the midterms. Is part of the Trump agenda seems to be moving to the old Democratic Party agenda And the Democratic Party agenda is somewhat adrift right now, trying to counter it. And you have the progressives pulling on one end and the more traditional Democrats trying to maintain kind of a sense of what they were. And I think that pushes creating a challenge for the midterms for the Democrats. At the same time, I think the concerns about the pace and the approach and the disruption on the consumer is actually one that is weighing on them. And as business sentiment continues, if small businesses don't start hiring and start laying off, then that goes against the base. So it really is a question of who owns the base these days and what is the base that they're playing to for each party. So I think there's some real challenges for the next election, midterms coming up for both parties that require some adjustments.
So Michael Hammer, on camera.
On camera. Bill, I'm going to disagree with you. I actually think that they will maintain the pace of changes and things that they're doing and implementing. And the reason is this. Right now, Trump actually has a decent approval rating despite all the unease with what's going on. And if they lose the House in the midterms, that's going to put a damper on things that they can do. And so I see him bulling ahead with the idea that if he is successful, he will get more of the same and hopes they retain the House. And if they're not successful in getting the buy-in, they'll have accomplished as much as they can push through during these first 2 years.
I think it's interesting, Michael, to the 5 areas of focus for them: securing the border, deregulation, and energy. People don't have a problem with those issues. They might have a problem with the heavy-handedness of some of the border deportations and all that, but generally that's been viewed pretty positively because of what was going on towards the end of the last couple of years. I think the public sector reform and DOGE is getting really mixed reviews. Again, I think people like the idea of a smaller government, but they are uncomfortable with the heavy-handedness of it and the human impact that's going on. I think the tariff one is really creating a challenge for businesses and employment. And I think that's the area they have to worry about is if employment starts going the wrong way and you start to see a recession, I don't know that they'll be as comfortable with a recession as they are indicating right now.
But at the end of the day, people vote their pocketbooks.
Correct, Michael. I'm just wondering.
Sorry, Karen. I just muted Roger.
No, I was just saying, Michael, I was just wondering, you said if the Democrats win, it might pause the momentum or whatever. I don't think he needs it because all the stuff he's been doing now is not through legislation or the Congress. It's through executive orders, DOGE. He's running roughshod over everything. I don't think he needs both houses to do anything apart from avoid an impeachment or something.
Well, remember, look to September and the CR, which was punting certain things down the road. But also, at the end of the day, if the Democrats have a majority in the House, they can push back more effectively in the majority than in the minority. And that creates problems for Trump. I mean, unless he's going to go the full autocrat path, which creates other issues.
Well, I guess I would ask it a little differently. Assume the Democrats had the majority in the House now. Let's say they'd retained the House in this last election in November. Where would we be anywhere different today?
Somebody else.
Yeah, you wouldn't have seen the continuing resolution that you saw get passed under duress. And I think that you would have seen more legislative response to some of Trump's actions. In other words, the Republicans in Congress appear to be perfectly happy to let Trump slash and burn, even if it's riding roughshod over their prerogative to set the budget. The Democrats, I don't think, would be quite so compliant.
It's interesting. Some of the cuts he's making, particularly around Doge, and a lot of them around the Biden agenda, will go actually to cut red districts funding.
Yep.
So he is going after his own base in terms of congressmen and senators with the Doge efforts.
The other thing to remember is that we haven't seen the hit to state and local governments yet from the cuts. They're not as visible, but I'd argue much more pervasive in terms of the impacts.
I think that's actually where the rubber is going to meet the road in terms of like the impacts of a lot of what's gone on in the kind of very accelerated total restructuring of the government is not going to be felt on day one. But it'll be interesting to see if it's felt even within the time frame of the midterms, or whether it's more of a 3 or 4 year thing. But as you say, when it's a lot of NIMBY things, everybody loves to cut the government until your programs are affected. And I would guess by the end of this year, you're going to start seeing the effects felt in districts all over, and just when your services and funding breaks down, it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that.
Well, and remember,
So Michael, sorry. Adam
Okay.
and Anthony have had their hands up, so let's keep it going.
Yeah, Stephen, you're characterizing the drop in the market as a correction. Do you see anything that is a tipping point that could push us into a recession? Do you see anything on the horizon in that way, such as the tariffs, maybe the war in Ukraine?
I think the thing that would push us into recession will be how long the tariff uncertainty goes on for. I think you need to understand, you need to have the rules of the road to keep spending going. And if companies retrench and the consumer retrenches in the US, then you will work into a recession. So I think getting through April 2nd and the subsequent weeks after to see the response, both what the Trump policy is on recip tariffs and what the response is from other nations on that, that'll free up people to understand how they can invest going forward, both in their businesses, how consumers can consume, and how governments can spend going forward from that. So I think you need to get through this period to see it, but I think the recession could come from just the extension of the uncertainty going on for too long a period of time that slows investments.
The graph that you had put up regarding the across all income levels, that was a graph on decline in savings and checking accounts across all income levels, or what was that exactly?
So that was the consumer sentiment declining across income groups. So it's the University of Michigan consumer sentiment of basically how comfortable are they with the environment that they're in for spending.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have declines like that, it's noteworthy, particularly with the high-end consumer pulling in.
Yes. And just a quick commentary, I've noted that down here where we've got dealers down here of boats. These boats sell for 500,000 to $1 million, and the inventory has grown. One dealer, he showed one boat in the past 3 months, and they've cut staff 50%. And the housing market down here, which is a lot of these houses this is Florida Keys, a lot of these are second and third homes. And we're seeing a inventory buildup of those second and third homes, which says, those income brackets that can afford it are concerned and they're selling their second or third home. So we're seeing it. I'm seeing it on the ground here. That's it. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome. Anthony?
Anthony, yep. Anthony?
Sorry, hi. Thank you. Stephen, what do you think about MSCI ACWI ex-US up about 9.3 as of now, today, versus US as it ties into this conundrum of, S&P, admittedly, vast amount of the revenue is global. But you've seen the shift. I mean, if we were here in December and said, okay, let's short the S&P and go long the DAX, because that's going to be the best, one of the best European performers as of March 18th. If anyone had said that, we would have said they were crazy, right? For multiple reasons, but that's what's happened. And so what I'm really asking is, so you've seen Asia, you can name your pick outside of the US, which has rallied. But what seems to be happening, once Vance had that February Valentine's Day speech in Munich, that I think was the shockwave. And so the question here is, how and if has the world gotten the notion and more the reality shock that they need to do things autonomously and maybe not rely on the US as a partner? And if that's correct, what does it actually mean going forward? What if this is not just a moment where these others retrace, but what if late December, call it Christmas Day, the 24th, was the peak of US markets, and there's now going to be not just a multi-month, multi-week, but a multi-year cycle of an engagement, or call it rejection. And part of that rejection may be, you can call it political, you can call it uncertainty, whatever you want to think about it, right? What if that exceptionalism is now turning away, coupled with, arguably a market that's richly valued? Now, this is not what I personally think. I'm just throwing this out there. And if there's some sense to that, then how should one react? I personally love Mag 7 and I love the free cash flow that they generate, but that has nothing to do with this.
I would say that the way I would answer your question is, from an investment perspective, I think the world now has more alternatives than we did back in December, for places to put capital more comfortably than you could several months ago. I think that the game changer for Europe isn't the returns of the market year to date. It's what Germany's doing to relieve the debt brake, and for Europe to step up their spending on infrastructure and defense overall. I think that they needed to get a wake-up call, because they were relying on dying industries that were not going to be relevant going forward, and I think they needed the wake-up. So I would just say that from an asset allocation perspective, you now have a chance to get back to the type of asset allocation we did before the great financial crisis, where you can have a better allocation between stocks and bonds, both private and public, that you can have a better allocation globally than you could before. But I would also caution people to not take what happened in the last couple months or since the start of this year and project that as a long-term trend, that the US exceptionalism is gone, Europe is now out of the doldrums, and China is off to the races. I think the issues that Europe and China have are structural, that will take some time to work through. I think you're getting a cyclical bounce that is perfectly warranted because of what's going on there. But I think there are real issues around the world. The US is not the only one that has them. So I don't think we've changed the paradigm completely. I think this does move us back to kind of the pre-great financial crisis world, where you can allocate around the world better than you could post-financial crisis. I still think Europe has real issues. Their banking system, which has done well in the run-up lately, is not a cured banking system. They're not standalone right now where they can be comfortable. You don't have to worry about the banks of Europe. I think the auto industry, you're seeing that with the layoffs of, who was it?
Case and Crip. Case and Crip.
Yeah, was somebody with 7,000 layoffs. You have Volkswagen still with their issues. So I think there's transitions that have to go on in the economy to get it to a more new world economy for Europe. I think China has a different issue. I think they've been cautious in their stimulus because they were waiting to see the cards from the Trump administration. I think they have a structural issue of getting consumption up. And, you know, if you're counting on exports in your China, Europe isn't exactly welcoming right now for their autos. So is China going to dump BYD autos on Europe? I think they're going to run into resistance there too. So I think Europe has their problems. I think China has their problems and the US has its problems. That said, I think all of them will do better over time. We just have to get through this near-term uncertainty, which is why I'm advising clients to not get caught up in the short term as much as they are, and not reacting to the ticks and the news headlines as much as they are, and stepping back and saying, where does capital have to flow over a reasonable period of time over the next 3 to 5 years? And that's where you can make the safest investments. And I think those are the areas that we've talked about in the private sector, as well as the public markets. It's electrification, it's digitalization, it's the reindustrialization of the global economy, and it's going to be the rebuild around climate and the rebuild around conflict that has to go on.
So I know Richard Gonda wants to weigh in.
Yep.
I like what you said, Stephen. Thank you. I agree with that. I think the one thing I didn't hear is opportunity. All that creates a lot of opportunity. Thank you.
And I thank you, Anthony, for helping create another WhatsApp group. Richard Gonda. Richard, you there? The floor is yours.
Yeah, this is Richard Cott.
Oh, sorry, Richard. Sorry, excuse me.
So
I'm gonna read. You look a little bit like Richard Gonda, but
okay, that's okay. Thanks a
you're
lot.
really small on my camera. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, the big thing that we haven't talked about today that I think is really central in what our current concerns are is around the 15 different sites that have now been hit in Yemen, and the increased, let's say, intensity of the conversation with Iran, and at the same time, Israel taking more action in Gaza and seeming to have a free window to do whatever they like. These are really dangerous escalators, and want to know how does that fit into your short-term investing?
Yeah, I left out national security as one of the areas to be focused on still. So as regular listeners know, I don't believe peace is breaking out soon, in spite of the president's desire to have a quick end to the conflict in Ukraine and the quick end to the conflict in the Middle East. I think the challengers have been around for a while. I think they'll still be around. So I think you want to focus on defense spend in areas, but I think you have to think about defense spend a little differently. Ukraine has shown us there's a new way to fight wars, and yesterday I think they had their first full unmanned attack, both air and land, with drones. And I think you're going to see that pick up in the Middle East. It wouldn't surprise me if Israel, with maybe the U.S. backing, goes after some nuclear capabilities of Iran. So I do think that we're at a dangerous escalation of those issues as well. And I think that's all part of the short-term stuff, although I think the conflicts will be with us for longer.
Do you think this is Trump and Putin tacit approval?
I don't know. I'm not sure what Putin's endgame is right now, other than to get all of Ukraine and the rest of what he's trying to get with the USSR back together again. I'll leave that to Adam and others. But I think that Trump is truly worried about Iran's nuclear capabilities, and also that the desire to end the conflict, so that I think part of the administration's agenda is to end the multiple conflicts, particularly with Ukraine and in Gaza, so that he can focus all the energies on China. I think that the goal for the concern for the administration is that, going back to the Obama administration, and Michael Hammer can weigh on this more, before the Obama administration, our defense mandate was to be able to fight 2 conflicts at once. I think the Obama administration lowered that standard down to 1.5, and we're fighting really 3 right now. So I think the goal for the administration is to get it to where we're only focused on 1 conflict and 1 major ally. Whether they can get there or not, I think it's going to be a lot harder than they believe. So I think that's part of what's creating the conflict here.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Rick, what's your take on it?
Yes, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, so, being a former fighter pilot in the Air Force, I have a lot of contacts that within the military, and what I'm hearing is that Trump is really ready to do an escalation with Iran. It's not just going to be this skirmish with the Houthis for long. And so I think that we should be, quite defensive in our short-term investing, because I think when the first missile really flies towards Iran, if that happens, it's going to trigger an even further bigger correction than we have now.
I think this is where the discussions that President Trump is having with Presidents Putin and Xi over the next couple of months will actually matter. But Michael, you have more connections here.
I was just going to say, I agree that there's increased likelihood of the U.S. attacking Iran, its proxies and allies, but it creates a complex situation because, for example, Russia has ties with Iran. So how does that play out? Turkey, which is a NATO member, has ties with Iran. How does that play out? And Turkey, and I lived in Turkey and worked there for 6 years. They used to be a staunch U.S. ally. Over time, they've moved away. They look east. They look south to the Middle East. So I wouldn't count them as a reliable U.S. ally and or NATO member. So there's just a lot of complexity. And in some ways, it sort of follows the roadmap of the run up to World War I, right? Because you have all these different alliances and relationships that one thing triggers other things that triggers other things. So we live in interesting times.
You really have to be careful about the perception versus the reality of what might happen. We get caught up in, listening to what the administration's saying every briefing, and I think you have to step back and say what's real and what's realistic that they can do, and what's can't they get done, and what's in their control. And I think when it comes to Israel and Iran, I don't think they have quite the same level of control that they did a couple of years back. I think Netanyahu's got his own agenda as well. And I think those are things that are kind of weighing on it. But all that said, and Mark, you saw the slides, it looks like I'm negative. I'm less negative on it. I think the short term will be sloppy. I think we're closer to a bottom on the S&P. I wouldn't call a bottom until you got through the tariffs, but there's a lot of sectors that are shaping up with double bottoms from a technical perspective that look quite promising. I think there's areas that like copper, like the materials sector, that a lot of the policies are being designed to restrict or promote those areas. So restrict access to or promote those areas that I think are important areas. And I think the rebuild, I think people have gotten a little bit away from the infrastructure needs, but they're only growing. We're underspending in those areas. And I think globally, you have massive infrastructure needs that are going to all play out. So there's so many areas of need that spending has to go to that I think you can invest in those areas more comfortably. And the other thing is a lot of froth has been taken out of the US market. You know, we've had multiples come in almost 20%. I think earnings for a lot of companies are okay. And I think the breadth of the market yesterday was, I think over 90% of the stocks in the S&P were up yesterday. So you are seeing some broadening out, which would give you a sign we're getting closer to a bottom, but I wouldn't call a bottom just yet. It may have happened last week, but with the tariffs, I would be less comfortable suggesting that we're there yet.
Enough. I just put in the chat that we added a WhatsApp group called Stock Strategies. Just with two caveats. If you are going to talk about a stock that you own, disclose it. And if in doubt, and don't talk your book. If at all, if you have the ability to move the stock, if it's a thinly traded one, and when in doubt, run it by me. But otherwise, I thought it's interesting just to get a few stock strategy discussions going. It doesn't have to be about a stock. And it can't be about like Stephen Burke's ARS ETF strategy on and how it's performing per se. It needs to be about what's happening in the market. It's like this discussion, but it's more about the liquid public markets.
We don't have an ETF strategy just yet, Mark.
I know.
Mark,
Yes.
so I can't brag about my call on March
No.
4th at this meeting and what it's doing today. It's not permitted.
It's humble bragging is not permitted now. But you know what's really good is like when you point out, just something like mining stocks. Like when Stephen talks about copper, what's a good way to play copper today?
You ask me or the group?
You, because you're an expert.
Well, I'm actually underweight copper. I don't have copper, but I'm just smart, and I bought the cable stocks when the AI was a buzz, because without cable, nothing works. So I started to buy Pricemian, which is ex-Pirelli, which is based out of Milan. And they recently, last year, bought the largest US cable company, and they're going to list in the US. They currently trade as an ADR here and then in Milan. And that's obvious to me because they have a 3-year backlog. Without a cable, how do you get to anything else?
Well, you know what? We're gonna stream in Riyadh and other places. We're using Starlink.
Okay, well that's good. Yeah, you could, but Starlink doesn't beam energy. But I think it is appropriate because I'm looking at a sea of red, and I think that it is appropriate that I talk about my call 3 years ago and also on March 4th. Because if there's a sea of red and the one green, or there's a couple of green shoots, then it's worth talking about. And I'm not doing it to brag. I mean, I talk facts. You have opinions, conjecture, and facts. I'm only talking facts now. So, like, just joke. I was joking about bragging. So, with your permission, I'd just like to mention it because I think it's really significant. It's fact based, not opinion based or anything else.
Just help me ride the line here. I'm trying to offer some interesting feedstock of conversation, just trying to not make it about everybody, about ourselves.
No, but it's not about me, but I think I don't want to disagree with you, but when I'm going to say it and you can cut me off at any time, but Rheinmetall's up 4.5% today, and a few minutes ago in Germany they announced what they're going to do with defense, and it's at an all-time high of 1431, and it was 1144 on March.
I think that's useful. That's useful.
And it's approaching a $60 billion company, and with disclosure, I started buying it at the outbreak of the Ukraine Part 2 war in 22 because they're the most obvious recipients of that. At the time, it was trading in the 200s. And I did mention it to this group, in fact, at your office, Stephen, along with the other European defense stocks, which were discussed at your meeting. And I didn't even bring that up, the European defense stocks. And you yourself, Stephen, mentioned Saab. And this was last year. And that whole ecosystem has rallied. So Rheinmetall arguably is not cheap now. It's very expensive. I'm not giving an opinion on it. I'm just giving facts. I'm not saying whether anyone should own it or not, but it's something to pay attention to. Clearly, the ramp in the European defense stocks has been like nothing ever before seen this year. And collectively, I'd have to say they're up over 100%. I mean, just look at Rolls-Royce off the bottom and how that woman turned it around when they announced earnings. What was it, a month ago? About a month ago, and including a share buyback. And they've gone from about 200 to 800 pence in quick time, like in a couple of years. So there's clearly a movement and an insatiable amount of capital going towards that. On the energy front, you have the same thing with Siemens Energy, which took a massive downturn in October of 23 when the wind turbine group that they'd acquired in Spain had taken a shortfall, but everything else was humming along. The German government came in instantly and said, while that company was at a 5 billion market cap, said, we'll match it with another 5 billion in cash if you need it. The CEO said no, and they've since recovered to about 60 euro. So the question is now, does this continue or has it peaked?
Right. That's what you were covering, Stephen.
Yeah, I would say the quick money's been made. Now the hard money comes in. I think it'll still go up because there's going to be additional capital flowing there. But I think it's going to take a while for them to ramp up their defense industry in an autonomous way. The interconnectivity to the US defense complex is massive, and unwinding that will not be as quick. So I think that you have to be careful about getting over enthusiastic. I think there's plenty of reason to be more enthusiastic about Europe and Asia, particularly China. But I think you have to really be careful about, are you jumping in after the first rally and are about to see another pullback? I think you just have to be careful about your timing.
Adam's got a comment.
I mean, literally 50 minutes ago, the German parliament passed an historic debt reform to pave the way for higher defense spending. They got rid of the 500 billion cap. Yeah. So, there's been a radical change here. But the real thing is what's in the belly of that and what's coming. I think that's what we have to figure out.
Adam, do you have a comment question?
Yeah, I have a comment. Anthony, you raise a very good point. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a question of political will for the Europeans. One has to keep in mind that Russia is on a war footing and has been on a war footing since 2014. So when you cut social expenses and move those to defense, the Russians will survive and they will accept it. The Europeans will not. The Europeans, so it's a big question as to, there are a lot of challenges. It's a big question as to whether the Europeans really can build out a defense sector that requires rebuilding and creating new supply chains for
retooling, rebuilding and retooling, because
that's right.
That's aren't even prepared for what, even if they had the capital, they're not. And I think that's the one thing that didn't come up in this call.
Well, hold on. They do have the capital. They do have the capital. The question is, are they willing to cut social services and invest that capital into building it? Russia did that.
Or increase deficits.
And whether the Europeans will do that is a big question. That is a question of political will. So only time will tell. Their quickest solution to this is converting the auto industry and other existing industrial assets they have into those defense factories. And Russia did that as well.
And which country benefits the most from that, Adam? That's one of the problems. They're going to have a, what is it, $900 billion defense fund or an $800 billion defense fund. And when they try and split it up to make sure that the member nations are comfortable with it, and that will they end up maximizing it, or are they going to not get a productive spend out of that, is a real issue.
That's right. That's right. And another issue, something to look at, watch right now, is the cost of energy and the supply of energy into Germany in particular, with Nord Stream in play and the oil refineries, Rosneft's Deutschland refineries being in play in Germany. Who gets control of that? And that also is going to supply the energy to rebuild the military industrial complex in Europe.
I think there's another issue too, which is they have to decide what the future of the defense industry is going to be, and where are they going to make their investments. It's an issue the U.S. is dealing with right now as well. But what are you defending against? And Michael, I think you've seen that from the military side of how we have to make the shift for our spend, but Europe has to decide what they want to focus on for their defense.
Well,
but my last comment is I am optimistic in at least in the short term regarding European defense sector, but we'll see.
Michael,
so I was just going to say, even today, here in the U.S., we still have the large program mentality. There's still a certain amount of, it's got to be spread around among the states to a certain extent to get the buy-in from Congress. So we're actually not in a good position to go to war if we did go to war. And that's not me being negative. I've spoken with a number of friends of mine in the military, and I was just speaking with a board member of a company I'm invested in that has military contracts, and he's somewhat sanguine, but he still had concerns about where things are going. And so again, I keep on saying we live in interesting times.
I want to make one last comment, and that is, Stephen, you were talking about which countries are going to benefit from this rebuild. Keep an eye on what happens in Poland. Keep an eye on what happens in Ukraine as well. Those two countries, Poland in particular, I think will be a big part of that rebuild of the European military industrial complex.
I agree, and I think Europe's going to look to Ukraine for the future of war.
That's right. That's right. So much technology has been developed there as a result of the war.
I think people have, and it's gone on for a long time now, but I don't think the Ukrainian people have gotten enough credit for the brilliance of their defense against overwhelming odds. Just amazing what they've done.
It's amazing what someone has to do just to survive. Yeah.
Bill.
What's amazing is that Putin and Trump are still talking after 2 hours.
Well, I'm not shocked that Trump could be going on for 2 hours.
It's true. We saw the State of the Union.
The question is what they are talking about.
Stephen, Putin can go on for hours as well. It reminds me of those speeches that Fidel Castro used to do. The older he got, the longer those speeches became. And you're seeing the same thing with Putin in his annual questions and answers from the public. I mean, the last one was I think 4 hours.
I suspect they're both just waiting to speak. They're not listening to each other, but that's another story. Bill, I think you had a hand up.
Admiration.
I was going to pose a geopolitical hypothetical to Adam. So okay. So with going back to the Iran situation, the fact that Iran's air defenses essentially have been completely taken out, it's 100% vulnerable. If in fact Israel and the US, so here we go with the hypothetical. Let's just say Israel and the US coordinate to completely take out Iran's nuclear capabilities. The regime there now that's an existential question for them, because without that threat, their reason for being is somewhat of a question, because their reason for being is essentially to remove Israel. If that goes away, then potentially the population could rise up and perhaps foment a regime change. So here's the actual question. What do you think Russia would do if that situation came to pass? Which you can say, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it certainly would shake, I believe it would shake the Kremlin. The thing about regime change or uprising, civil unrest, it's only successful if there is someone from the inside to lead that unrest. Somebody inside has to be able to capitalize on that. That's the way all regimes fall. Yeah. It's never just because the people rise.
I mean,
So
Bill,
to your question, I don't know, but it would send tremors through the Kremlin. One last thing.
If anything, though, Adam, to your point of rising, it also could harden even further. I'm not sure it necessarily, look what's, and when you attack the regime, sometimes it rallies the people.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind also the demographics of Iran. It's a very young population.
It is.
Yeah. And they have lost touch with that. They have nothing to do with that, with the 79 revolution. Very similar to what you're seeing in Cuba. Young population, and they had nothing to do. They don't remember Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and Los Barberos. It's to them that's, nothing.
Michael Hammer?
Oh, I was just going to respond to Bill's hypothetical.
Sure.
And, that would be a very dangerous assumption. That is, that they can take out all of Iran's nuclear capabilities, number one. And given that they do have quite a bit of uranium at 60%, now you're in dirty bomb territory, right? So they don't have to actually have a nuclear weapon that is fissionable. They could use conventional weapons with nuclear materials, and that's pretty nasty as well. So that's a very dangerous path to go down, because unless you are 100% certain that you're taking out all of their capabilities, they could, do a lot of damage in the response.
I think the bigger question also would be what would China's reaction be?
Yeah.
China's economy is not very strong, and they're dependent on stability in the global economic world. They would not be happy with that.
I think they'd be more likely to use it as an opportunity than to respond directly. So whether it's in the South China Sea or Taiwan, taking advantage of the, I'll do air quotes, distraction, I don't think they want to get involved at all in a Middle East conflict. It's just not their area of interest.
No, they're still focused on Taiwan. I don't know if you saw this week, they were doing naval exercises with barges similar to what the US used in Normandy, but much larger scale, so that they're practicing for a land invasion now with mega barges that they can run across the South China Sea and try and get a land attack there. So they are singularly focused, Michael, I believe, on what's going on in the South China Sea is their area of national security focus and military focus.
I mean,
But
they,
Stephen, they're also watching what happens in Ukraine, obviously. We all know
Mhm.
that. And they're
Yep.
watching how Trump's reacting to that in these peace negotiations. And this very well may be, I mean, I'm saying this in a very big way, but there are nuances to this. This may be a grand bargain of dividing up the world. And you take your client states, you give us your client states, Venezuela, Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, and we give you Ukraine.
That's why people were a little unsettled by the dividing up the asset discussion that they were having today, when the assets are not theirs to divide.
Right. Exactly. That's right. And with Taiwan, with China, the bargain is take Taiwan and you get out of Latin America.
I don't hear that from Trump. If anything, I'm hearing that the opposite. This is why he's focused on China,
You
and he's
don't.
mindful of what it means. It was interesting. We had the drone company in last week, if anybody remembers that discussion. So they have this drone that can go 100 and soon longer, but what it does is it can hold smaller drones for the drones swarm, which
Right.
is how they see battle. I mean, that's
It's
really what I keep hearing from the war scenarios, is whether, you know, barges, mega barges, or whatever, is what's the impact of drone swarms and all of this, because that's the other element of battle these days.
yeah.
well, but at the end of the day, regardless of drones, if you are taking territory, you have to have boots on the ground.
If you're going to hold it.
Fair enough. I'm just saying how you get those boots on the ground has a drone element to it.
No question.
It's a timing issue. It's emotions involved.
And let me say also, when I talk about trading,
We're having a conversation of 5 people. Does anyone else want to enter into this conversation?
Hi, Mark. It's Michelle here.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm good. I'm good. Really interesting conversation. I just have a very quick question before I drop off. I'm just wondering, I think Stephen
You're
heard
not
a lot.
allowed to do that. There's no quick questions and then I drop off. I can't do that.
Okay, I'll stick around. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Obviously, we've had, I think, quite a lot of African countries now put on the travel ban. What are your thoughts around that? Is that a signal that the US is, very little appetite for Africa? And then what are your thoughts? Because I mean, we're working quite with a lot of the countries in Africa, right? Especially around the commodities trading side. And there's just going to be so much growth, right? And opportunities for trade actually and investment to happen. Again, I've heard your thoughts on tariffs. And I agree with a lot of what you were saying on the tariffs end. But what are your thoughts around that move from the African side?
I wouldn't connect that to the US's thoughts on Africa overall. I think that's more part of Trump's immigration agenda. I think the US has done a terrible job of cultivating our relationships in that region, and I think we've probably abdicated most of the power to China in that area.
Yeah.
So I don't think the US has put the focus on it that China has, and I think the US is probably comfortable doing that. Whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision, I think that is the approach they're taking near term. So not good or bad. I just think I think we're too distracted and we can't be everywhere. And I think that's part of what the administration's trying to do. Part of the aid cuts are, if we're just throwing money around to all these different places and not getting much in return for it, are we better off focusing the spend on areas that we're going to get better relations, better support, better trade, whatever it is. So I think that's part of what's going on. But I think it's less Trump, but I think it's been more the U.S. policy for quite some time, where we haven't really been as focused on that region as China has.
Well, but Trump
Right.
doesn't believe in soft power.
Yep, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Clark.
Yep, Jonathan.
Always an interesting conversation. I remain enthralled with this group and its depth of expertise and information. Okay, so Trump wants NATO to step up more into the role of providing their own defense. Germany has just made a major decision. How is that going to play out with Putin and the Ukraine? That's my question. With Germany coming online and Trump wanting to divide up, and you've got the UK willing to put boots on the ground, where does Germany fit into all that?
Interesting question. I think let's put in perspective. They're going to spend 500 billion on defense in Germany. I think Europe's going to do another 500 to 800 billion over probably by 2030. I think to get programs in place and scaled up takes years. So I think that Europe will still be very heavily reliant on the U.S. defense complex while they're cultivating their own. But I don't think it changes the calculus for Russia materially in the near term. I think it just gives them a sense that they will be facing a stronger Europe on the other side. I don't think it really changes their calculus on Ukraine in the near term, because I just don't think it will matter that much short term.
Okay, thanks.
Well, it is 12:12. I think we've, unless someone's got a compelling question or comment, I think we give ourselves a pause. And thank you, Stephen, for kicking off another great discussion. And next week will be our 5th anniversary of these briefings. And again, Stephen, if it's possible, we can honor it by being in your
Yeah, I think we can. I'll check later today, Mark, and let you know.
Okay, Ali, it's going to be compelling.
Just the politics just nowadays is a little hard to predict, but the Friedman, the author, actually the one that who did the 100 Years After, it actually tells a lot of things about the way the remapping and geopolitically the changes that is going to happen in Europe. I think this is all about the Europe and rezoning some of the areas in North Africa. And of course, you know, what's happening in the Middle East, a little further south, where there's a big damage that's happening, that America is kind of shifting down and a little bit of with the power and also losing a lot of money down in that Gulf. But according to the news that I've been watching and listening, that currently Turkey is actually in a big move, which they are trying to leverage, positioning themselves to be a pioneering power as they have strategically located the country to create shields, but also helping out with the drone technology to Ukraine and help strategically to reconsolidate their needs. And of course, in the other parts of the southern parts where Turkey is now actively stepping into the lands to fight against PYG and hopefully dissolving the PKK soon because of the outside resources, which the question is now, promise not compelling, but it is the South part might also may see some active fights, and that may not happen the ceasefires anytime soon. And if this happens in the north and south, and attacks, I think looks like there might be, hopefully not, but in the east there might be, the Iran attack might be received from the US. And that's what I see is like the whole fights that is all happening around Turkey, which then might be something later on may change a little geopolitical moves and this new strategies to be made that I think is already made. And this is, if this is the time, and yes, we're living in a very different times, strong and tough times, but there's a lot of new implications, new regulations, and I think that's happening. And if it's the time, we might be facing some hefty difficulties and some of the trade based on the tariffs as we were looking at. But I think the world is about to face some big shifts, and hopefully the Europe does receive a very small amounts, but I think Turkey is strategically located themselves to protect also a big portion of the European security as well. And it's a big question I still do have actually, the how Germany is going to stand to this, because it doesn't really have the power, and it happened once back in the years, and how they're going to really stand and endure with their technology and all other resources if America doesn't really stand next to Germany, which obviously there's a lot of conflicts and contradictions that is happening in the European, which Trump is now trying to control that, which is something that I really like it, because
Ollie, where do
Europe
you want to?
really needs. Yeah, go ahead.
You're speaking at the 75th minute, and you throw a lot of
I was
nuance.
listening, Mark, and then also,
No, I
I
know
to
I think the Turkish perspective needs to be shined or highlighted. I'm just thinking I was trying to wrap this up, but what you're doing is you're opening up a new front, the Turkish front.
it is the reality. If this is something
I
we
mean, it
really
is
talk about in reality, that's something that we really have to consider.
yeah.
It's something that is happening behind the scenes, by the way. So
I do think interesting, Mark, on this subject that aside from the Saudis, I think Turkey has been elevated in its political role, geopolitical role to a different level because of what's gone on in Syria, because of their position in NATO, and because their relationship with Russia. It puts them in a very interesting spot as a potential power player going forward. That's maybe not the view that people had before because of some of their economic issues. I also think what the Saudis are doing is actually, while you're having the event there, is another side of their move up in power going forward. So
which now there's a new fund it's now giving out from the Arabic countries for Gaza, which now all changes the new game. Like there's no Trump Gaza, or there will be, or how is that going to integrate with this funds? I don't think there will be a way to merge them, but I think that will be another conversation, Mark, that we can have. Thank you.
Yes. I think we'll have to think of when to do this deep dive. All right, I've got too many things in my mind right now, all up in the air. So I love to multitask. I have too many balls to think about. So thank you everyone for that.
thank you all.
Thank you.
confusing me.
See you
Thank
next week.
you. Have a
Enjoy
good
the rest
day.
of the day, guys.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Good to see everybody.
Thanks, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Anthony. Bill, this this begs another survey.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah. I think you're right, Mark. Maybe we should think about teeing it up for June, so we've got lots of runway.
Well, I have the event in Riyadh. That's what I was thinking of, but and there will be an allocator session at 9 a.m., which will be 4 or 5. I forget Arabia time. There, but we're all set up to do that on the 29th. So let's
Okay. 29th
April.
of April. Okay. Well, yeah, that's reasonable. All right. I'll
See?
put my head to it.
I'm reasonable.
No, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, April definitely later April. We've got some